Hello, everyone. This is Philosopher for the People with Stefan Bertram and Ben Burgis. Ben Burgis eating donuts. And today we're going to be talking about fundamental ontology. Um, I did find it very funny, Ben, in the article where
hmm
you highlighted various people being like, I can't believe you philosophers are saying electrons aren't real.
Yeah. Well, because that was the natural assumption and I mean, I totally get it, right? Because people saw that there was a philosopher and his friends were arguing with a physicist and her friends, and the argument had something to do with whether electrons are real. So, like, I think it's a very natural assumption that must have been what the sides were, but no, uh, just the opposite. So, yeah. So let me just
And to clarify something from the beginning that you don't mention in the article,
yeah.
I think, is for anyone that's going like, what? Why is there even a question about electrons being real or atoms being real? Can't we
Yeah.
like look at them in microscopes?
Oh, we
Um,
cannot.
the distinction here is between optical microscopes, which allow you to see really small things with an actual kind of visual magnifier. Um, Though when I was reading to like really really fine ones, I was like, I don't think like I think at the far end these aren't direct observations either. But anyway,
Yeah,
um,
which is von Frosten's position, by the way. But yeah, that's pretty extreme. Most people who are skeptics about unobservable entities consider like molecules and stuff to be observable. No problem.
but to
But
see atoms and stuff, we have to use electron microscopes, which
yeah,
basically fire. Which is funny because the electrons are the matter of the day.
yeah,
So in some sense, they have to be real because we fire them out of electron microscopes to see other atoms. But we fire electrons out of electron microscopes, and they hit stuff, and then we kind of use a computer based on where they did hit and didn't hit stuff to kind of get an image of things like atoms.
yeah. Um, I do remember once as a graduate student arguing that we would consider that to be a form of direct observation if like biologically we just had electron microscopes built into our eye sockets
Right?
instead
Yeah.
of eyes.
If yeah, yeah. If we had
Uh,
like this kind of this idea of like eye beams. If we actually had eye beams, if to
yeah,
see
yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah,
the eye
exactly.
being a passive receiver.
Yeah, I mean, surely. I mean, there is an interesting question here about what counts as observation and what counts as like inference from observation. That's kind of becomes murkier the more you think about it. Um, like I feel. I mean, look, I know I can't know what it'd be like to be a bat, but I also feel fairly confident that that bats with sort of full fledged sentience and language and all that would consider what they did with sonar to be observation.
Yeah,
So I don't know, but you know the standard terms of the debate are that there are unobservable that like stuff like protons and electrons are unobservable entities that are like postulated by a physical theory. Um, and I just kind of, take that as read
yeah,
in this essay. I mean, as we've been talking about for the last couple of minutes, I think you could actually totally question that, right? But like that seems to be the premise everybody else is working with, and I'm not fighting with it here.
yeah. When I was reading stuff today, I was like, hmm. As it turns out, as it often is, things are more complicated than you might have expected.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Which is a
Well,
bit sad because if you think one thing is going to be really simple, it should be fundamental particles, which are actually very boring and straightforward.
yeah, uh,
Every electron is literally identical to every other electron, apart from its location in space and time. They have no scars.
which is also strange because famously saying that an electron has a particular location. Anyway, whatever. It's all this is all stuff that you're gonna get a headache very quickly if you try to think about, which is in fact part of how some people end up being anti-realist.
Yeah.
Right?
There's what people call a theory, but if it ever was a theory, it's definitely disproved now. But there was an idea at some point that there actually is just one electron
Right.
going really, really fast
Yeah. No, that's
and
fun.
like
I like
doing
that.
weird time stuff or whatever.
Yeah, let's say I remember taking. Well, I wasn't taking it. I was like um, I was just working there, but I was sitting in on David Albert's class on the philosophy of quantum physics at Rutgers several years ago. I remember him having a line. I remember it seems like he was probably quoting somebody, but I was endorsing it about how look, as long as you do this and that, you've predicted all the things you need to predict for basic thermodynamics to work. Sure, universe can be upside down, sideways. That's time can be backwards. Go nuts. Um, but yeah. Sorry, just let me have
Yeah, I mean, I think
fish my delightful. This is the was telling you earlier. This is one of the. I have absolutely no idea why this is, but Los Angeles seems to have more like independent donut shops than anywhere in the country, which has been true forever. I mean, you rewatch like movies from like the 1940s, you see it there. Although now half of them are like donuts and Chinese food. But
the idea of a donut shop is not something that exists here.
yeah. Okay, let's start with what a donut is.
Actually, because I'm gluten free. Don't
It's
know if
like
I
a
mentioned
bagel, but sweet and solid.
it's not a very interesting fact, but I'm gluten free. But I got to eat donuts about a month ago for the first time in a very long time because I found some gluten free ones that they sell at Asda. So I very happily ate some donuts recently, but it'll be a long time since.
There you go. Uh,
But I think the thing with the kind of debate that kind of
yeah,
centers around this piece is that I think we'll have a very interesting debate, me and you. But I think the debate in question, highlighted in the article, is not that interesting because it seems that Hossenfelder committed to something that she doesn't really believe, or kind of half believes in some cases, but not believes in others,
yeah,
and then kind of like slowly back down over the course of a Twitter argument.
yeah. I mean, I think that like her positive views are the least interesting part of the debate. Um, but I do think there are a bunch of larger issues that are interesting, and also just all of this is just very funny to me, honestly. So yeah, back it up a little bit. Uh, I I had never heard of this woman, right? I heard of Sabine Hossenfelder for the first time in like October,
Oh, right.
maybe. Yeah, like like she just wasn't whatever. She just isn't on my radar. I mean, the things. I mean, look, the things I watch on YouTube are like um, either like political content, right? Political content I like, political content that I hate, but I have to like harvest to like clip it for my show, uh, or like, you know, some dude who's doing like a breakdown of like which the best Halloween sequel was, right? Like that.
Right.
Those are the things that I watch on
I
YouTube.
don't watch any political content at all on YouTube.
Yeah, good man. Uh, but as self-undermining as that is for me to say, you're probably happier. But in it, yeah, I saw somebody Jammed in the chat says cat videos, but I feel like I've got one perpetually going on here. I don't need YouTube for that.
Live.
Exactly right. Three-dimensional. It's like literally racing around and playing with the paper bag in the corner right now, right? So yeah. So I don't watch this stuff, right? You typically. I have actually seen several of her videos at this point. But back in actually it might not have even been as long as October. I'm trying to think. Cause I had no, it was like early November because I had been like people will sometimes send me like articles or videos that are like, oh, hey, and like that they know I'll hate, just to like, just be like, hey, this might be a fun thing for you to cover in the show or write about for Jacobin. And I'm all in favor of that, right? Makes my life easier. And somebody a while ago had sent me Sabine Hossenfelder's video in defense of capitalism. It's called like Capitalism is Good, actually.
Oh right, I forgot that this actually came from the capitalism thing and not from like a free will intervention.
Yeah, which I have seen now, but like literally I watched that yesterday. So in early November, and yes, there will, having sat through the whole thing, there's definitely going to be an essay about that at some point. But in any case, because it's a doozy. But yeah, like somebody a while ago had sent me her capitalism video, and whatever. I'm very bad about reading messages. I'm always shamed by the fact that like 200-year-old Noam Chomsky is so good at answering all of his emails all the time, and despite having like spent the last 150 of those years having a much busier schedule than I ever will. But this message had been sitting there for a while unread, and then I was like, oh, I should really look at that. And I watched the video. It's like, yep, all right, that does indeed seem like something that would be good to write about. I ended up writing about it for Jacobin, and she and it's it's a really bad video. We can talk about that at some point if you want. But in the
I had lowest expectations for that as possible. I've got no idea of the contents, but
yeah, I mean, it's like that video is like it's basically, it's on about the level of Jordan Peterson's defense of capitalism.
And I mean, it's strange because I can't see the connection between her work, because at least with the free will stuff, she's
right,
just
yeah,
saying like, I understand physics
that makes sense,
and determinism is real, so free will is fake, which is just millions of people do that a year in freshman philosophy classrooms.
Yep.
But there's just no connection between her work and defending and anything to do with kind of political economy.
Totally. Yeah. So I think the way that she got interested in it is because one of the things she does talk about on her channel is climate science. And so I think the connection is like climate activists saying that like the problem is capitalism. It's like capitalism is actually good.
There was a big history YouTuber who would defend the Red Army, kind of like their performance in the Second World War.
Yeah,
so you got like a lot of
couldn't defend anything about them. That would have to be it. But yeah, go on.
So he got a lot of communist followers because most historians will not give them a fair shake.
Sure.
And then it came out that he was like a massive like Randian.
Sure.
Who believed that the Nazis were socialists and whatever. And this led to like a massive fraction of his base. I'm just imagining something. The Hossenfelder was like, well, I've got too many fucking commies in the comments, so I need to come out and put out a video.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I think the actual intellectual content of her defense of capitalism, like I said, is kind of not that far off from like what somebody like Jordan Peterson might say, but it's definitely pitched differently, right? The sort of, ideal viewer of that video is somebody who like listens to NPR and watches TED Talks. And that's like definitely the vibe that she's going for. It's sort of the wine track version. But again, the content is honestly pretty Peterson-esque. So I'd written that article called Capitalism Isn't Just Buying and Selling Things, It's a System of Domination, which gives you some idea of what the sort of claims that were made in her video. She spends like the first like several minutes of it talking about how money is more efficient, like using money as a medium of exchange is more efficient than bartering. And it's like, yes,
thank you, based Sumerian progressive.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's just like, okay, did they have capitalism in Sumeria, right? Because otherwise, I'm not seeing the relevance here. But in any case, so I'd written that article, and then I did actually have a very brief Twitter interaction with her about it. which consisted in, I guess, somebody she must follow on Twitter because she saw the notification, like tagging her about the article, and her very openly only reading and reacting to the title. Like it's and this is not a long. I mean, it's a Jacobin article, right? Like they're never that long. That's
Yeah, I
like
mean, you have to make several of them a week or whatever, so they can't be too long.
Not quite, but yeah, it's like a really good week might be a few, but yeah, it's but yeah, it's like, generally speaking, it's like pretty hard to let Jacobin, Jacobin won't let me get away with more than like 2,000 words, maybe, kind of as the upper limit, so it's not, like they're generally shorter than these philosophy for the people essays. But yeah, she very openly didn't read it. She said, if the title is that silly, why do I have to read the article? Which I think sort of says something about her level of curiosity about all of this. And then, but then since I was following her on Twitter because of that interaction, I started to see shortly afterwards, because actually when my article came out, looking back on it, was 2 days after the beginning of her weeks-long exchange with Philip Goff. Joff? Anyway.
They seem like goth girls and goth barbarians.
I'm just going to say Goff. But in any case, so I started to catch wind of this, and then it just kind of kept going and going and going and going. And until finally, I mean, I'd already been planning on writing about it, but it was just a little bit too perfect. Yesterday, they both kind of, icily made up, right? And agreed to stop arguing about this. And so, I just kind of thought, hence the framing device of this essay where, it's sort of in the spirit of like, I don't know, there's like anybody who ever watched the TV show Community, there was an episode about a massive pillow fight at the college that's like narrated in the style of a Civil War documentary, right? So, it's sort of that kind of, or I remember like Chappelle did something similar once for like a gang war, that it was done that way. So it's like sort of the same joke as the Community episode or the Chappelle skit. It's the great Electron Twitter war of 2023. Because they really did spend weeks going on and on about this, and lots of other people getting in on it, and etc. And I sort of said in there, obviously there's something more than a little silly about writing an essay about a Twitter argument, but one, obviously I do find this very, very amusing, and two, I actually think that it's sort of a nice platform to talk about a lot of interesting things, because as frustrated as I find Hossenfelder's interventions in all of this, all of the subjects being talked about were interesting, and there were things I want to talk about, and I also kind of wanted to use it to explore this larger issue of the phenomenon of the celebrity scientist who is both aggressively uninterested in learning about the distinctions between philosophical positions and the arguments for them, but is somehow simultaneously aggressively interested in expressing opinions about them.
Yeah. I swear I made notes about this essay, and now I'm looking at my notepad now.
Well, I guess just to kind of get the ball rolling, the sort of main thing it was about, it's not how it started, but exactly, but the main thing it was about is this question of the existence of electrons. And we kind of previewed this earlier, that you would naturally expect that if a philosopher and a physicist are arguing about the existence of electrons, well, look, famously, right, what did Cicero say? There's no position so absurd that it isn't defended by some philosopher. You would very naturally assume lots of philosophers have believed lots of wacky things, right? So the kind of hardy scientific common sense of the physicist would be clashing with the the nonsensical speculation of the philosopher, and that would be how this would be going. And in fact, for reasons we could get into, Goff, who I don't, dislike in any way, but like, he does have some pretty eccentric positions. So like, it would not be, wildly out of character if he had said something odd in this discussion, but he actually doesn't. He like everything he's saying here, more or less, is pretty reasonable. And it's so that the heart of it is essentially that Hossenfelder is defending, essentially, she doesn't put it this way, and she's very and I don't know, she's actually a little bit like, there are points in the debate where she seems to be playing a little bit dumb about what these terms even mean.
Did this start off about God? Was it she saying that God isn't observable, so we shouldn't believe in him?
Very close, yeah. That's I mean, yeah, that was essentially the issue. So the starting point of all this, right? So I should say, like, what it ends up being about is essentially, although she doesn't use the term, about Hossenfelder kind of half-heartedly defending some sort of instrumentalism or anti-realism about the philosophy of science, such that we don't actually need to assert the real existence of electrons. And Goff, defending realism about science and the unobservable entities postulated by scientific theories. But yeah, where it starts out is roughly about God, like you said. So Goff wrote this essay for the conversation, which I read, while I was preparing to write this. I also watched a bunch of Hossenfelder's videos. Which is why, by the way, I know that she actually does know what instrumentalism means. She does mention it in one of those videos. There's like even a screen cap, you get where she says instrumentalism, right? And she doesn't seem to agree with it then, so it's all very confusing. But in any case, but Goff's essay, I actually thought was pretty good. Like, even though he says things in it that I disagree with, but it's about fine tuning, which I'd written about for Philosophy for the People. Back in like June, right? That philosophers and physicists in the Multiverse of Madness episode, and in particular, it's about the same issue that I wrote about then, which is the sort of idea that fine-tuning considerations give you a reason to believe in the existence of a physical multiverse. So roughly, the idea is it's incredibly, mind-bogglingly unlikely. Unlikely to an order of magnitude that we could spend the rest of it just trying to come up with metaphors to express it all, that the universe would just happen to develop such that the physical constants were set exactly where they would need to be for life to be possible, even in the extremely limited way it's possible in our universe.
So what if we just said there was a lot of them? Not just
so
one.
what if we just said there were a lot of them? Exactly, right? Like, well, maybe look, if there's life going on, if like all the possible universe, are out there, right? Then like it's not that it's not that surprising, right? If you've just I don't know, if you're rolling a 100 trillion sided die, and then any particular outcome of that will happen if you roll it, will hundreds of trillions of times, right? That's roughly the idea. So and after all, we 100% of the universes in which anybody can ask this question are going to be among the ones where life is possible. So really, maybe fine-tuning isn't that mysterious, and it doesn't give us a good reason to believe in God, right? This is how.
But I think we would take it that this is kind of like a bad solution to a non-problem.
Yeah, exactly, right. So my position is that it's a non-problem. Goff's complementary position is that it's a bad solution. He doesn't actually agree that it's a non-problem, but he just he doesn't really argue for that in this essay. He just kind of states it in passing. He has a book that's a new book that I have not read that's to a large extent about this stuff. So I assume in there he argues against the non-problem view. But my view is that it's not really a problem. That's there you go, adding a cat video to the internet. But my view is it's not really a problem because if you like this in that weird little religion bit at the very end part of my debate with Charlie Kirk, this came up, and and he said, "Hey, what about the fine tuning? Doesn't this give you some reason to believe in God?" And the argument I made there is like, well, look, if you randomly, I think a deck of 52 cards has been randomly shuffled, and I get the ace of spades, that doesn't give me a reason to think that it wasn't a random shuffle after all, because after all, there's
all of the results you could possibly get are equally unsurprising as each other.
Exactly.
Like if you started getting one of hearts doesn't exist. That would be very surprising.
Yeah, that would be surprising.
If you got 2 of hearts, 3 of hearts, 4 of hearts, 5 of hearts, that's surprising. Or various other things. But getting any particular card is completely unsurprising.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't matter how many cards there are.
It's a single shuffle. One card is picked. Whatever one it is, there's going to be a 1 in 52 chance of that one. And yes, it's true that there's a 1 in 52 chance on the hypothesis that's a random shuffle, and a 52 out of 52 chance if there was cheating to guarantee that you would get that card. But that in itself doesn't really give us a reason to think that there was cheating to make sure that you got that card. And in the and my point would be, well, look, I don't see why it makes a difference in principle to the structure of the point, whether the deck has 52 cards or 52 billion cards or 52 trillion cards or 52 times some number that we just can't even conceive of because there's so many zeros after it. And, we'd have to do some mathematically complicated notation to say what we have in mind. It seems to me that the structure of the point is the same regardless. I understand that a lot of smart people who seem to have thought about it a lot disagree with me about that, but I've never quite been able to tell why. That's my position. Goff's position is, he does actually take the problem seriously. He does, he is sort of on the side of the theist in the sense of thinking it's a real problem, or the multiverse person for that matter. But he doesn't think that the multiverse is a good solution to it. He has this interesting argument that the multiverse people. So I kind of refer to this in the essay, but I just didn't have space. I've been ever since like May, right? I've been capping myself out at 3,000 words strictly for these. So I had to cut the part where I was going to get into this, but in his article, he makes the argument that there's a sort of inverse gambler's fallacy being committed by people who think that that postulating multiverse helps with fine tuning. And
I was going to say, if we go back to the card analogy, if we start introducing all these other universes, that's actually the only time where we could be surprised, and then fine tuning can make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, so the idea is so the classic gambler's fallacy, right, is you think that that like if something's happened a bunch of times, like if you flip a coin and it's been heads 10 times, then that makes tails more likely the 11th time. Or there's like hot hands, which is the same idea, except you think that heads are on a roll, so the 11th is probably going to be heads too. And the reason it's a probabilistic fallacy is that the outcomes of past flips don't change the probabilities for future flips. The probability is always the same every time, right? And he thinks this is sort of variation on this going on with the multiverse solution, where you say that, well, it's that it's like you're thinking that the chance of your chance of a particular unlikely outcome is somehow increased by the fact that that there are other places where the same process is going on, but he thinks it's sort of the same underlying mistake, that it's like no, but like each individual instance, the chances are what they are, right? Like it has nothing to like there's nothing to has nothing to do with anything, right? Whether it's happening other places or not, right? Which is an interesting argument. I kind of liked it. And and his tweet where he tweets it out is he said many physicists assume there's a multiverse, but maybe they got the maths wrong or something like that. It was like a very like it's like the sort of way that you'd kind of tweet it out to sort of intriguingly kind of say what you're saying in the article. And Hossenfelder, I don't know that she actually read the article. I sort of suspect she didn't. But
I was about to say that she's chief title reader.
Yes, exactly. She is a champion reader of titles. And she got annoyed by it, not because she disagrees somehow with the substance of the argument, but because she thinks that that she has sort of more fundamental objections to a multiverse, and she says you never need to assume anything that isn't observable in order to explain observable reality. And she says in the follow-up tweet that she's not saying that there isn't a multiverse, just like she wouldn't say there isn't a God, but she thinks that that sort of information from the observable world can't tell us one way or the other. We should be agnostic about gods. We should be agnostic about alternate universes, right? That's her position. And Goff's position, response, which I mean, whatever. He's like a British philosopher. It's pretty mild, right? But his response is sort of gently drawing out why that might be something that a lot of people would nod along to, but if you actually think about it for a moment, that's a pretty extreme position. And he says, well, hold on. Like, can't assume any unobservable entities in order to explain observable reality. What about electrons? And they end up going back and forth again, literally for weeks. There are pauses in the fighting, but the ceasefires were always broken. They end up going back and forth about this for weeks, and I think Hossenfelder essentially has. I think this is my reading of what she says about this stuff. I think she actually has two positions. She's not. I don't think she's aware that she has two positions, right? But I think that she's in a roughly similar cognitive position to I don't know, like a lot of people who might be like students in an intro philosophy class who are sort of saying a bunch of stuff in class discussion, and then you say, well, hold on though, just a minute ago you said this other thing, and then maybe if they're a particularly good student, they'll be like, oh right, and they'll see the issue, right? But I think that Hossenfelder, who I should say, like, I don't actually think, like, I don't actually doubt is a very smart person. I just think that she's spectacularly arrogant about this stuff and sort of.
Oh, no, that's probably. I mean, one very much can lead into the other, right?
Yeah.
The fact that presumably it's the fact that she's brilliant that has developed this aura around her.
Yes, right, exactly. So yeah, I think I think that like because she's so arrogant, because she just assumes that like she can see all of these issues, even ones that are uh, you know, certainly related to physics, but not identical with claims about physics per se, right? Like that she that she sort of thinks, okay, look, I'm this brilliant person, I know all this stuff about physics, true, right? Therefore I must see this clearly, and anybody who's saying I'm missing things or being inconsistent or whatever must, they must just be, being ridiculous.
They're doing pointless things like philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, yeah, in practice, I do think she has two different positions on this. But the first one, the one she starts with, in response to Goff saying, well, hold up, what about electrons? Is to defend her view about gods and parallel universes by saying, essentially, we should also be agnostic about electrons, right? That essentially, what, again, like I said earlier, what she's defending is kind of instrumentalism about the philosophy of science that we have, well, we shouldn't really care whether a physical theory that references all kinds of unobservable entities is strictly true, only that it's useful. And in fact, it's the latter doesn't give us any particular reason to believe the former. And there's like a raging debate about this, or I don't know how raging it is, right this second. I can't speak to that one way or the other, but certainly there has been, right, a raging debate about this. That if you go back and like, certainly decades ago when I was taking classes about this, you'd read all these arguments that people made, one of the really intuitively obvious reasons to think that these two issues are connected, that the usefulness of physical theory and the actual truth of physical theory are connected, is that it would be one hell of a coincidence otherwise. Like what's the, you sort of need an explanation of the usefulness. And so there's like what's called like the no miracles argument, which is essentially it would be this absolute miracle of a coincidence if it just happened to be the case.
I mean, but isn't the idea that they're a good approximation of something, but being a good approximation of something doesn't make you real?
Yeah, well, that's
Like
the
if I see up on a hill something which I think is a rabbit, but is actually a hare. For 99% of things, my postulate about it being a rabbit, gets me anywhere I want, like in predicting its behavior, predicting, roughly how it would taste, even, if I engage in certain actions. But it's still in the fact that it's still in the end not a rabbit.
I think I'm just learning something new today. I kind of thought that was just some weird old-fashioned British word for rabbit. What's the difference?
Hares are like big and scary, and rabbits are little cute things. I don't know if
Really?
they're part of the same genus. I mean, they're presumably part of the same genus eventually, but no, they're different. Yeah, that would be a disastrous philosophical argument if actually the difference is semantic. But no, hares and rabbits are concretely different things, but some
Sure.
things which can be confused for each other at a far distance.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe, right? So there is, yeah. I mean, the more you kind of dig into this, there are some shades of gray between sort of straightforward scientific realism and straightforward scientific anti-realism. I mean, because in some ways, I mean, we were talking about philosophy of religion earlier, right? So I'm thinking about like, the position that David Hume takes in the dialogues concerning natural religion, or at least is generally understood to be taken, which is whatever you want to call it. It's certainly not atheism, but like it sort of feels very close to it in a way, right? Which is okay, something or other must have created the universe, but I don't know, right? That's like in other words, he's sort of us vaguely assuming that some sort of force outside of the physical universe is responsible for bringing it into being. He kind of grants the theist that much, but then kind of stops there, right? Because it's like I just don't know where you people think you're getting all this information about it that like even like a sort of enlightenment deist would claim to have that we're talking about one being, a being that's perfectly rational, et cetera, et cetera. So how on earth would you know that, right? So
That's a help.
okay, that's useful. That's good. They're
really big.
All right, that's great. Yeah, now new information about the world. Yeah.
Because you seemed in the article, to quite strongly come down on the side of electrons and quite strongly come down against
No.
any kind of instrumentalism. So I was quite curious about this.
Yeah. My instinct has always been to say, like, for God's sake, if physics postulates electrons, there are electrons. We don't need to have a philosophical argument about this. What are you people talking about? That's been my classical instinct. I was actually trying to suppress that in the essay.
You uncurious scientist.
That's but
okay, to bring up the classic.
But there are two. But there is a distinction I want to make here, right? So, in other words, like, look, yes, I do think there are electrons. I am broadly sympathetic to the idea that you should believe our best confirmed current physical theories until we get better ones, if and when we get better ones. But so yes, I'm yes on electrons. That's my view. But I do think that there are sort of a range of more and less plausible ways of denying that, right? So like using the rabbit hair analogy, there is it seems like you could if your position is we have basically no idea, no way of like drawing any kind of conclusions about what's going on in the microphysical world because we can't, we can theory, because we can't, independently verify our theories. We can't check to see if we got it right. Therefore, we should just kind of throw up our hands about the whole thing, right? If that's the sort of anti-realism that you have in mind, I find that extremely implausible. If you, if on the other hand you say, well, there must be something like electrons, right? And if we sort of, kind of say electrons because we do need to get on with the business of science, but like it is on a hill and like I can't see it great. It's possible that it's a hair, right? Like then I think that's I mean that maybe you could sell me on. Like I have I'm less unsympathetic to that certainly than I am to just saying it's all a big mystery. Like we don't really know.
Electrons were meant to be fundamental particles, right?
Yeah.
But they're actually made of quarks.
Okay. I mean, lots of other things are supposed to be fundamental particles. I mean, okay. It's also I want to be really careful here, right? Because I don't want to be the inverse Sabine Hossenfelder and make confident pronouncements about physics without having done sufficient homework, right? Sure. So the status of quarks, I'm not well positioned to sound off on, but I'd say whether it's the case that electrons really are fundamental particles, or maybe not quite fundamental particles, or how that works. I mean, even if that's definitely right, then and I'm just not totally clear on the state of play in current physics on that. But even if that's definitely right, I mean, look, so atoms, right? We're supposed to be fundamental particles. We didn't say, oh, there aren't really any atoms because they aren't fundamental, right? There are subatomic particles. We said, yeah, they're definitely atoms. It just turns out that they're not fundamental. So,
Right. I mean, but this gets into kind of Mereology and what is, why is a table a real object and so on. But I
I'm
would
sorry.
say,
Say that last part again.
if an electron is a composite object,
Right.
then the argument moves to stuff we've discussed before in Mereology, in kind of the existence of things of parts, as in, why is a table a real object? But
Okay.
I would say, how far does this kind of, well, the physicists say it's real,
Okay.
go?
So
Because, for instance,
I
physicists,
will say just for whatever it's worth, I'm gonna I've just appallingly violated my own preferred practice for how to do these things because it always makes me cringe when I watch people in YouTube videos superficially look things up and then pronounce on them 10 seconds later, as if they now knew what they were talking about. But
yeah. I mean, chat is really far behind, but electrons are not made of quarks, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So all of the I just googled that, and all of the results. The top line is that it all says that protons and neutrons are made of quarks, but electrons aren't. They were scientists think they really are fundamental,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
look, I mean, I think that that um, the real question here, to my mind, is sort of a basic epistemic one, right? Which is, well, how do we go about forming our beliefs about this stuff, right? Like, and I think that when it comes to beliefs about where my cat is, right? Then I can just use like just anecdotal impressions, do a pretty good job of that. When it comes to beliefs about um, what's true of about the microphysical world, then I my strong bias is to think that we should think that whatever our best confirmed current theories are we should at least tentatively accept them, right? Pending I mean, it's fallible, of course. You could turn out that you're wrong, right? But again, though, I would say that like there's a sort of radical agnosticism um, on one end of the spectrum about the microphysical world that I find very implausible. There's a point in the article where I sort of make fun of one of the leading proponents of a maybe not quite that bad, but pretty agnostic position on this stuff, Bas van Frossen. Uh, this is ad hominem, but it's just funny. Somehow being an adult convert to Catholicism. So like, you know, not quite enough evidence for electrons. Epistemic standards are too high for that, but transubstantiation, sure, that sounds fine. But
Yeah, I feel like if you're a Catholic, then there aren't any unobservable entities in the universe. 'Cause they're
that's
all they're all being simultaneously observed by God.
yeah. But this is the. I mean, he was an Anglican, but this is the Bishop Barclay move. That um, the three dialogues that everything is that uh, everything is being observed because everything is constantly being observed by the infinite mind of God. That's why you don't need physical reality underlying mental reality for there to be like object permanence and or a real world that doesn't
Yeah, I
depend
mean this
on.
is just Berkeleyism.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but Ben,
Uh,
do you believe in centers of gravity? Centers of gravity being the mathematical expression of kind of the confluence of gravity between different objects, which are things which very much exist in the equations of physicists.
uh-huh.
Uh,
Yeah. Um, I just I guess I'm just not inclined to sound off on that like on the on the spur of the moment, right? It's like because just first reaction is it sounds like it might be the sort of thing that's like, okay, is referred to in the statement of a scientific theory, but but might be sort of uninterestingly paraphrasable into other things, right? So like a sort of classic example of this is the I don't know, like the statisticians talking about the average American family having 1.5 children.
Right.
That like it's not that, oh, okay, well, it's a true statement of social science, therefore we should believe in in half
Half
children.
children.
Because that's, we read our ontology off of the science. So no, even if you think we should read our ontology off the science, we should first see if like we can kind of do a paraphrase. Like we should first make sure that's what we really mean when we assert the scientific sentence, and that there isn't some paraphrase that can better capture what we mean. And so, like, I don't know if centers of gravity are like that, right? Or if there's like a real assertion of like a distinctive physical phenomenon there, but that's just because I don't know enough about science.
Well, I bring it up to say that someone asked me if I was a mereological nihilist, and the answer is definitely not. But that I would believe in centers of gravity for the same sort of reasons I believe in electrons, which is to say, and these things are very much related. On one hand, that these things are useful for physics and for science and for human endeavor and so on, and that they would also be observed in the equations of like a rational non-human actor who's observing the same sort of things, which in the terms of Dennett is a real pattern.
Uh-huh.
And because because physics is meant to carve nature at the joints, this kind of thing, these two things are basically identical. That what is useful for physics is basically identical to what is uh, what would be
Yeah,
observed by a rational
yeah, yeah.
non-human observer,
I
and
see
including the equations of.
Silver Harlow in chat says King Solomon visits a lot of households to make that statistic true, which is good enough. It deserved to be read. But yeah, I think. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear you're not a mereological nihilist. I would also, I don't know if this actually carries any argumentative force, but it is just kind of funny to note that I am a mereological nihilist would be, a incoherent statement, right? That's but and in fact, this spoilers could be very close to something, the sort of argument that Sabine Hossenfelder makes in some context. It's like, oh, what are you saying that that like a bunch of fundamental physical particles are mereological nihilists? But
A mereological nihilist is someone who doesn't believe in composite arguments for people saying they are regarded in the chat.
Yeah, that's also, mereological. Yeah, that's and then mereological nihilism better not be decomposable into more basic claims, or else the mereological nihilist could believe it. It'd be just to catch anybody up who isn't familiar with this terminology, right? Mereology is the branch of metaphysics where we're interested in parts and wholes, and mereological nihilism is the logically possible, just barely position that that there are no composite wholes, that there are no cases where parts come together to make larger wholes. And then the opposite of that, which actually does have plenty of defenders because philosophers sometimes think strange things, as we discussed earlier, Cicero and all that, is mereological universalism, which says that all parts come together to make wholes. It's just that we're only interested in some of them. So like there is like an object that is constituted, especially because most mereological universalists are also four-dimensionalists about time. So there is an object that's constituted by this coffee cup and Julius Caesar's left hand and the the right pinky toe of my future great great grandchild.
I was just going to do objects which exist on like the left half and the right half of the stream, which are
Yeah,
obviously separated by like 12,000 kilometers or whatever.
yeah. Right. That there is this like Voltron entity of me and you that
And the
exists.
cat.
It's just the cat. Yeah, it's just not. It's just not. It just doesn't have interesting properties because it's just it just consists of part of it doing Stefan things and part of it doing Ben things and part of it doing Ash. That's the name of the cat, Ash things. Um,
But the other answer is to say that exactly because it's not interesting and wouldn't be observed by anyone apart from a philosopher making a weird example means that it isn't real.
yeah, right. So this takes us back to the den and all that. So they have so yeah, like presumably like any remotely plausible answer is going to be somewhere in between those two, right? That there must be, like, because it seems to Quine has this classic essay from the 1940s called "On What There Is," where he starts out by saying, that the basic question of ontology is what is there, and the answer is everything, which in a sense is true, right? That's like if something doesn't exist, there is no thing there to be part of everything. But like also really it's like which composite, which parts come together to make wholes, right? Like it really seems like the right answer intuitively is some of them, right? Like not none of them or all of them, right? Like surely some of them. So yeah, look, I think that to the extent that you're to the extent that you're willing to grant that physics gives us a pretty good reason to think that electrons and protons and such exist, or at least that something very much like what we think those are must exist. Like there's a range of positions, but to the extent that you're closer to that range, I'm going to be more sympathetic to what you're saying, right? That's the bias that I have here. But what I find interesting is, but I also, again, this is another sense in which I would not want to be the inverse Sabine Hossenfelder, right? I'm not going to like, I'm admitting my bias. I'm not purporting to make an argument here, right? Like, really, I mean, except in a really rudimentary way in this discussion, right? Like that. I think, I think that there is like a vast literature on this, and you should probably, to the extent that you're going to very confidently sound off on it, right? You probably should take some interest in figuring out what people in that literature say. And because Hossenfelder kind of aggressively doesn't take an interest in that, then I think in practice she ends up having a couple of positions, because in getting ready to write this essay, I did watch several for videos, and one thing that I noticed, and that other people in the Twitter discussion, the Great Electron War, noticed, is that in other contexts, she really seems to believe that there are electrons. Like, she, this kind of half-baked instrumentalism about philosophy of science. That's like,
Like if
well,
someone argued that climate change isn't real because electrons aren't.
yeah. I mean, she says like, yeah, right. I mean, she does like, like she doesn't seem to think that like it's a big mystery what's going on in the microphysical world. We should just be totally agnostic about that. All we can really say is that there must be something or other about that that makes that structurally lines up enough with the posits of our theories to make these theories predictively useful, which is the only virtue we should really care about, right? Like this is this sort of half-baked, what I was just calling her half-baked instrumentalism in the discussion with Goff. Like in all sorts of other contexts, she definitely seems to think there are electrons. Like I just watched her truly awful video. I don't believe in free will. Here's why. Yesterday, was one of the last things I did, before sitting down to write. And in that video, one of her arguments is like, because she does, she is basically doing the determinism is true, therefore free will isn't real thing. Somebody did tell her the word compatibilism, so she has like a minute of the video where she's sort of trying to address it, but she doesn't quite seem to get what it means. And so one of her arguments for determinism is, well, look, nobody would think that it would be ridiculous to say that electrons had free will, right? Therefore, it's ridiculous to say that our brains, which are ultimately made of electrons and other such basic particles, have free will, because the deterministic laws, it's going to be they're both going to be deterministic, or they're both going to be indeterministic, which she associates with having free will. And wouldn't it be silly to say that electrons had free will? By the way, agreed with that premise. Electrons do not have free will. But wouldn't it be silly to say that electrons have free will? Therefore, humans must not have free will either, right? That is an argument she makes in that video. And very similarly, in fact, in a previous run-in between Hossenfelder and Goff, like 4 years ago, she wrote some kind of blog post, and I did check to make sure this is definitely that Sabine Hossenfelder's blog, and it definitely is, right? She's still updating it with like links to her videos and stuff, where she makes a very similar argument against panpsychism. The view that I think the more careful way to put it, and I have not read up that much about, like I've kind of been aware for the last few years that like there's been a little bit of a comeback of panpsychism, that philosophers on Twitter are always arguing about it, but but this is, again, while I'm laying my biases on the table, a view that I have trouble I have trouble getting past the fact that it seems obviously false. But in any case, I think the more careful way to put what panpsychists are probably trying to say is there's some sense in which consciousness is itself a fundamental feature of all physical reality, and this sort of evocative and unsympathetic gloss on it is like everything has a mind, or everything thinks, or something like that. And I do think the difference between those is going to matter, and that and that the panpsychists aren't necessarily going to actually be saying the second thing, but Hossenfelder definitely takes them as saying the second thing. And so in her article, it's like, everything thinks. That's not true. Electrons don't think. And
everyone loves electrons.
Yeah. So
why isn't this article about the up quark or the strange quark?
I don't know. I was say maybe quarks. Maybe it's just a few. Maybe we just need a few more decades for quarks to filter down to the popular consciousness to the point where people are going to use them as examples as much as they use electrons. But
the names of the quarks show why physicists should not be allowed to name anything. They're called up, down, top, bottom, which is that's bad by itself. That they're up, down, and top, bottom. That's a disaster. But then two of them are called charm and strange. But there's nothing strange about the one that's called strange compared to all the other ones, anyway.
So, like, a good half of those are just physicists making dirty jokes, right?
I don't think so. I've heard the reasons before, and they're like they're a bit silly.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Alternative names for the bottom and top quarks are beauty and truth.
No comment.
Disaster.
All right. Yeah, that's you want me to take these entities seriously, you're gonna have to do better than that.
Well, you don't just want to like induce a million mystics. You shouldn't call them things like
Yeah,
beauty and
beauty and
calm.
truth. My God, yeah.
This is my
Praise and
strange
charm.
particle.
All right. Uh good Lord. Yeah, so I think that on it certainly seems to be the case, in fact, rather routinely, that Hossenfelder derives larger conclusions about the nature of reality from claims made by theoretical physics, right? In fact, this seems to be like a decently large part of her output. And so this is, on the face of it, very hard to reconcile with her embrace in this discussion with Goff of instrumentalism, about you know, unobservable, anti-realism about unobservable entities. We should be agnostic about whether there even really are electrons. And my, my best guess about this is that, she genuinely doesn't know which of these positions she holds or quite realize the tension between them, because she sort of brackets them out into different, like the cheesy joke I make in the Substack is that she's Schrodinger's physicist. She's in like a superposition state between believing one of these and believing the other one, until the sort of flow of the argument, brings out, resolves it into one or the other position. And in
You need
fact,
someone to kick the hornet's nest and ask her if gravity wells. Sorry, not gravity wells. Centers of gravity.
centers of gravity. Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, gravity wells too, I guess, because that's kind of slightly further up on the realness scale.
sure. Uh, yeah. So, yeah, and I definitely get what you mean, but it's also like there's something that definitely chafes about the idea that there's a scale of realness. Uh,
Do you know what the example Dennett gives
uh,
for the thing that isn't real as the
yeah.
companion to centers of gravity? It's the center of all of his socks. It's obviously like you can make like a mathematical expression of like the single center point around which like you could draw a sphere of
Yeah.
Holler's socks, as you can draw a circle around kind of a center of gravity with a center point.
Okay.
But he thinks you shouldn't believe in that because it's not good for anything, and no one else would observe it unless you know unless he
Yeah.
demanded that you do so.
Yeah. 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 Um, yeah. I'm not entirely sure what I think about that. I mean, I think like there's no center of all your socks is probably a good move. But yeah, that's interesting. So
You know
by the end of
the game of life,
yeah,
the thing with gliders and flyers, and
yeah,
he uses that throughout the essay to
that's a
talk about
very
real
Kennedy
time.
example.
Yeah, it is. He starts going into absolutely ridiculous examples. It's a good essay,
Nice,
the real patterns essay.
nice. Um, yeah. So I guess the by the end of the discussion, again, I think without quite realizing it, Hossenfelder has slipped into her other position, which is that electrons do exist.
And very
Uh,
important for proving philosophers wrong.
yeah, exactly, right? There are all kinds of things she wants to prove philosophers wrong about, and she cannot resist the temptation to use electrons to do so. The assumption that, I mean, like, again, makes sense, right? She wants to use what she knows as a theoretical physicist to prove philosophers wrong. It's really hard to do that if you don't think that theoretical physics is true. So that's, so yes, she constantly gives into this temptation, and I think she doesn't quite realize how much it's in conflict with this sort of half-baked instrumentalism. But, and in fact, by the end of the essay, she's sort of, because she's in kind of dismissive Twitter reply mode, right? Where, you're just like, oh, this person's just confused. I'm gonna set you straight, and that's all I'm doing here. She has sort of, by the end of the discussion, she's sort of reverted to, she's kind of retroactively rewritten the issue that they were talking about in her head, to, well, okay, physics doesn't assume electrons, it demonstrates
Right,
electrons.
which is very silly.
Yes, this is the opposite of what she started out saying. I mean, this is
Yeah, I mean, it was so silly. I didn't even want to say it to make fun of it. Like, I just wanted to
no,
not mention it.
it's silly. I mean, it's like I don't know. Many years ago, I had a friend I used to, that, me and our other friends used to, constantly argue with, like, while we're all like out at the bar in South Miami, and he, because he was just fond of taking like extreme, not very well thought out positions and being super duper adamant about them, right? And just never budging in the course of conversation. And one thing I remember realizing,
That's boring. Like, it's much more interesting when someone takes a random radical positions, but then will slowly budge.
yeah, I mean, he sort of did, right? But the way he did it is that, like, like the sense in which he would never budge is he would never say, okay, I guess I was wrong, right?
Right.
But what he would do is just like, he would kind of be adamant and be adamant and be adamant, and then like 3 hours later, the thing he was being adamant about was actually like your position at the start of the argument.
Right.
And like sometimes, and sometimes if you pointed it out to him, he would actually realize that he'd switched his view, right? But it was such a slow process of, that, well, what I'm saying is that, that he kind of didn't realize until he got there. And I think something similar is going on here, because of course what she's affirming, she seems to be affirming at the end of the discussion, is exactly what she was denying at the beginning of the discussion. She was very explicit. She said, that anything that's not observable, right, be it gods or alternate universes, that we can't conclude the existence of any of that stuff on the basis of physical, of like considerations about the observable world, like, cosmic fine tuning. And she did definitely seem to be embracing electrons, going on that list. So it's like, well, come on, you're just ending the position, you're just ending the conversation taking Goff's position. And again, I find the whole thing, I mean, obviously your mileage may vary. I find the whole interaction fascinating, like, because it's, I mean, even just the stuff
Well,
like,
it is interesting in that it's like a million other arguments on Twitter, but all the people involved are like massively like top of
yeah,
the table, very famous, etc.
yeah, exactly, right. It's like, I mean, on one level, it's just as ridiculous as, sure, a million arguments going on between randos on Twitter, but like, on the other hand, this is going on between this extremely famous theoretical physicist and somebody who, I mean, his own sort of extremely strange positions in some subjects we haven't even really gotten into in this discussion because they're largely off topic. But, as odd as some of his positions are, right, I think from everything I've seen, a very good philosopher, Philip Goff, and certainly, as you say, a massively accredited sort of philosopher. And
So
so it's,
are you doing Goff's neo-British Hegelianism next week?
no, I am. I'm not doing that. Right. So yeah, this is in the essay. I kind of say, like, because remember, he has this objection to the multiverse solution to time fine tuning, which I actually find, like, I think it's a plausible objection. But he also disagrees with me that, in thinking that like fine tuning isn't like a real problem. And so he agrees with the theist that it is, but he sort of tries to solve it. I take it by trying to chart some sort of middle course between standard atheism and standard theism, where the universe, in some sense, is like intrinsically imbued with purpose, but like it's not imbued with that purpose by some being external to it. So I sort of say like this is the sort of view that would be much more common to see philosophers arguing for, like, I don't know, around like the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th centuries, right? The era of like Henri Bergson or the British neo-Hegelians, Bradley, people like that, right? And it's sort of startling and interesting to see somebody with Goff's prominence and Goff's sort of training in analytic philosophy and the sort of virtues of his writing. Like he really is very clear and very rigorous. And, everything I haven't read that much, but in everything that I've read, he definitely has those virtues. It's very strange and startling to see him apparently arguing for this. He doesn't draw that out in that essay. He does apparently in his new book, which I haven't read. I have read like one interview by him about the book, which is why I'm sort of able to even say as much as I just did. But no, I'm not going to read all that in the next week. At some point, I'll probably read it and probably write about it. But
I think it does show that for most people, having like a genuinely atheistic metaphysics is just very hard, and people will engage in all sorts of strange maneuvers to avoid it.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, somebody in chat is objecting to my describing Sabine Hossenfelder as a famous theoretical physicist because they argue that her, essentially that her fame doesn't really come from that. I'm not, I can't really speak to that. She is a physicist and she's very famous. Those two things are true. They have what their relationship is. I'm not well positioned to diagnose, but
she's a better physicist than us.
Yes, she is clearly a much better physicist than anybody on this screen. And
a much better physicist than Goff, presumably.
Yes, presumably a much better physicist than Goff, and I also think. Yeah, somebody was saying in the chat they were listing at 1.5 speed, and they, meaning us, were talking about how skeptical they are of subatomic particles. Slow down, maybe, and pay more attention. That's kind of the opposite of what happened in that conversation. But in any case, but yeah, look, she is a physicist. So yes, she knows more about physicists than you or I or Goff or, presumably the overwhelming majority of people watching. Like clearly that much at least is true. It's also true, and I will say, having watched a smattering of her videos at this point, I actually do think she is really good at sort of breaking down concepts from theoretical physics and explaining them to laymen. Obviously, that's my judgment as a layman, but from what I could tell, she definitely does have that skill, and I even think that to the extent that that's kind of what she sticks to doing, I even think that's a useful service. That's good. You should do that. As with many other celebrity scientists, I do kind of wish that she would either decide that she is interested enough in philosophy to read some of this literature and figure out what some of the positions and arguments and counter arguments are, or just decide that she's not interested in it and stop talking about it. I think those would be the two sort of useful things for her to do. I'm not holding my breath for her to do either one of them. So I expect that we'll continue to talk about her in the future. But in any case, for next week, I was actually going to write about some stuff that came up in a book that I have read because I interviewed the author about it. We had to do a pre-record because of the Los Angeles to Ljubljana time difference, and we're going to play on Monday's show, Freedom, a Disease Without Cure, by my favorite Slovenian person. So this is So yeah, that's gonna be coming up next week, and then yeah, I'm gonna try to take a break from YouTubery in general for a few weeks over the holidays.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it's Christmas.
what's that?
Oh yeah, it's Christmas. I forgot.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
When
Then
you said that, I was like, but wait, it's like August. What holidays?
no, it's December. Uh, so so in any case, um, that's so coming up next week. Watch the interview tomorrow. We actually do. There's a lot of ground covered, but we actually do get into a little bit of a friendly debate about some of the free will and physics stuff that comes up here. But in any case, coming up next week.
Zizek stuff, so I will get to see the number go very high, which makes me happy. Bye,
That's good.
everyone.
Bye.